Hello and welcome guys, I'm Curtis and today is going to be my Open Trials episode, pretty much going over everything you need to know about the Canadian Premier League's Open Trials. Now if you want to see more Canadian Premier League content in the future, maybe consider hitting that red subscribe button to subscribe to this channel. Now the Open Trials was announced late in August and it's the Canadian Premier League's way of bridging the gap of talent from probably the early 90s to about now, where a bunch of players maybe fell through the cracks and aren't playing professional. So that's this is the way to kind of bridge that gap. Now the Open Trials was announced back in late August by the Canadian Premier League, and what the Open Trials are is pretty much just tryouts for players who aren't playing professionally right now, and these trials started back in late September in Halifax and will conclude in early November on Vancouver Island. These trials are being coached by the lead coach Alex Bunbury, who is a former Canadian men's national team player who scored 16 goals in 65 matches. He's gone on to play for a bunch of different clubs in Europe, including a club like West Ham United and the Premier League. He's also recently, before retiring, played in the MLS with the Kansas City Wizards. Now the first Open Trials ended up happening in Halifax back in late September, and a lot of the coaches had a good turnout with about 108 players ended up showing up, which is pretty good for the very first ever Open Trials. And a lot of the coaches did state that the talent level there actually was pretty good, and it set a good standard and a good bar for the other future Open Trials to try and reach that standard and that bar. And I'm actually going to have an interview right here on this channel next Tuesday with one of the players that actually did attend the Halifax Open Trials, a player by the name of Jonathan Hammond. Super nice guy, great guy, and I'm really excited to drop that interview right here on this channel next week. Now, a week after the Halifax trials, we had the Quebec Open Trials, which showed a lot of flair, and of course Quebec as a province is known as a good hotbed for young Canadian soccer player talent, and we definitely seen that at these Open Trials with great flair in that midfield, especially with players like Cody Elida coming in and really surprising a lot of the coaches and turning heads. The next Open Trials we had was in the city of Hamilton, which, just like the people of the city of Hamilton, a lot of good hardworking blue-collar players came out to attend that trial. We had a great amount of players that ended up making it through the first day. I think the highlighted position of that Open Trial would have to be the defenders, as there was a lot of big, strong defenders that looked like they could potentially be playing in the Canadian Premier League. The fourth stop on the Open Trials ended up being in the city of Toronto, or actually I think it was actually taking place in York region, just outside the city of Toronto. And that's, of course, being around that southern part of Ontario. There's another big hotbed there of soccer talent coming out of York region and the Toronto region. And we definitely have seen that in the Toronto Open Trials, including, there's a lot of good midfielders, a lot of good attackers in that trial. We even got to see Elijah Larin, which is Kyle Larin, Canadian national team player's younger brother, turn out for the trials. And who knows, maybe he might be playing for a club next year in the Canadian Premier League. Now the latest trial we ended up having was in the city of Winnipeg, which I was lucky enough to attend, and let me put it forward to you that there is a lot of good talent just in the prairies here, and we got to see some of that talent at these Winnipeg Open Trials. A lot of good defenders, which we kind of knew about in the province of Manitoba, but there's also some really good attackers there as well. It ended up making for a pretty entertaining last 2 days in Winnipeg for the Open Trials. Now these trials have been, I think, a really good showing of just how many good local kids are in our provinces or in our home regions that have the level and potentially the prospect of playing in the Canadian Premier League as soon as 2019. I think that's a pretty good number, 20 players, which is what the coaches have been stating now after 5 trials, that they see potentially getting tryouts for preseason for a bunch of different clubs in the Canadian Premier League. So that's a pretty good number to hit, and there's a lot of great effort out there. There's still 2 more trials to go, October 25th and 26th in the city of Calgary, and November 5th and 6th on Vancouver Island. So if you're in those areas, definitely check them out if you can. It's a lot of fun. You get to see the best of your local talent, and it's a good time, and who knows, some of those players might even be playing for, you know, your local club, your local Premier League club pretty soon. So that was my episode about the open trials for the Canadian Premier League. If you like this video, please make sure you hit that like button, and you can also share it with your friends and family, share it on social media, just so we can get the word of the Canadian Premier League out there. And of course, I got that interview next week with Jonathan Hammond dropping right here on this channel, so make sure maybe consider hitting that red subscribe button, and I really appreciate it. And thank you. See you next week.